how he loves you and me. Oh, how he loves you and me. Oh, how he loves you and me. He gave his life. What more could he give? Oh, how he loves you. Oh, how he loves me. Oh, how he loves you and me. Jesus to Calvary did go, his love for mankind to show. What he did there brought hope from despair. Oh, how he loves you. Oh, how he loves me. Oh, how he loves you and me.
As always, thank you, Jimmy, for doing that. If you've got your Bible, if you want to look in Leviticus chapter 3, we are going to start with the last of the free will offerings, the non-mandatory ones. They're more voluntary, although God did command them. There's not a punishment if they didn't do them. And I'm hoping that I can kind of show you and summarize here in just a minute how those three different, because we've been talking about a burnt offering that was done for certain things, and a meal offering, and then tonight's a peace offering. Well, I'm going to kind of show you the difference in them and kind of summarize it and show you how they were different, maybe in a summary fashion. But there's only 17 verses, so I want to read all of chapter 3. And if we have time, we'll start chapter 4 when we talk about sin offerings, because those are completely different than what we've been talking about. But look at Leviticus chapter 3. Now, if his offering is a sacrifice of peace offerings, if he is going to offer it out of the herd, whether male or female, he shall offer it without defect before the Lord. He shall lay his hand on the head of his offering and slay it at the doorway of the tent of meeting. And Aaron's sons, the priest, shall sprinkle the blood around on the altar. From the sacrifice of the peace offerings he shall present an offering by fire to the Lord, the fat that covers the entrails and all the fat that is on the entrails, and the 2 kidneys with the fat that is on them, which is on the loins and the lobe of the liver, which he shall remove with the kidneys. Then Aaron's sons shall offer it up in smoke on the altar on the burnt offering, which is on the wood that is on the fire. It is an offering by fire of a soothing aroma to the Lord. But if his offering for a sacrifice of peace offerings to the Lord is from the flock, he shall offer it male or female without defect. If he's going to offer a lamb for his offering, he shall offer it before the Lord. He shall lay his hand on the head of his offering, slay it before the tent of meeting, and Aaron's son shall sprinkle its blood around on the altar. From the sacrifice of peace offering, he shall bring as an offering by fire to the Lord its fat, the entire fat tail, which he shall remove close to the backbone, and the fat that covers the entrail, and all the fat that is on the entrails, and the 2 kidneys with the fat that is on them, which is on the loins and the lobe of the liver, which he shall remove with the kidneys. Then the priest shall offer it up in smoke on the altar as food, as offering by fire to the Lord. Moreover, if his offering is a goat, then he shall offer it before the Lord. And he shall lay his hand on its head and slay it before the tent of meeting, and the sons of Aaron shall sprinkle its blood around on the altar. From it he shall present his offerings as an offering by fire to the Lord, the fat that covers the entrails and all the fat that is on the entrails, and the 2 kidneys with the fat that is on them, which is on the loins, and the lobe of the liver, which he shall remove with the kidneys. The priest shall offer them up in smoke on the altar as food, an offering by fire for a soothing aroma. All fat is the Lord's. It is a perpetual statute throughout your generations and all your dwellings. You shall not eat any fat or any blood. This is really the first time there's one of those little admonitions in there. Don't eat fat or blood. So we've been talking about the burnt offering and the grain offering. Tonight is the peace offering. It's sometimes called a fellowship offering. It's sometimes called a well-being offering. It's the third one. These are the voluntary sacrifices of worship. And again, if you remember back a couple of weeks ago, the burnt offering and the meal offering, our sacrifice is more of it's your communion to God. It's your covenant with Him. I'm giving myself to the Lord. The peace offering is your communion with God. It's a fellowship offering. It's a little more personal. It is the one that the priests are not required to do. People are not required to do it. They can when they want to, but they're not required to. So the priest doesn't do it every day. It's not one of those daily things. But it's an offering of peace. Now, here's where I think me and you get kind of confused with some of these things, is the wording of it. Because this is a peace offering. Peace and fellowship, what God has given us. God has given us fellowship with Him, and God has given us peace with Him. All that comes through redemption in Christ. Because God has redeemed us, we now have peace and fellowship. Not only do we have it with God, but we have it with each other. And so this peace offering is actually an offering of gratitude, or it's an offering to say that things are going well or going really bad. Now, I'll explain what I mean by that. Peace is, when we talk about peace, and here's where I think the lines get blurred sometimes. If I say peace, what is peace to you? Most of the time in our vernacular, in our language, peace is the absence of conflict. We talk about peace treaties. Two countries are at war, they make peace, and it means they don't fight anymore. That's not the way it's used in Hebrew. When he says it's a peace offering, he's not saying, me and God's going to stop fighting with each other, or me and my fellow mankind's going to stop fighting. When he says peace, it is a direct reference to prosperity. And so when he's talking about a peace offering, he's saying that we are giving this offering to God based on something emotional that's happened to us. Now here's where it gets really kind of odd, because you give the peace offering either in times of very good times where things are going really well for you and you want to go and give back to the Lord. And I'm sure because there's really three different kinds of peace offerings. Or you give a peace offering when things are really bad, when things are really, really bad. But what you're doing is still to say that I'm in communion with God. That's why you do this. And so if you're an Israelite, you're sitting at home and everything's great with your family, your daughter just gets married to this great guy in Bethlehem, and everything is hunky-dory with your family, then you might say to your wife, let's go and present a peace offering to the Lord, because God has blessed us with all this cool stuff. We've been really blessed by God. And so you go and you make this peace offering to the Lord, and by that you're saying, God, we're so grateful that we have fellowship with you. We're grateful that you're ours. And on the reverse of that, if there's just really bad calamity that befalls you, somebody's gotten sick, or somebody's had an accident, or you've lost some cattle or whatever, you might say to your wife, let's go make a peace offering to God, because even though we're suffering from this, we have still fellowship with Him. But we still have Him. And so that's when you do a peace offering. Now, there's three different kinds of peace offerings. One's a thanksgiving offering. So you can give this offering in view of thanks. In other words, an Israelite expresses thanks for a particular blessing. God, thank you for blessing this. This is why I'm coming to you. Or you can give it as just a free will offering. You're just going to the Lord and you're saying to God, I'm giving you the best expression of gratitude that I can give you. Nothing in particular has happened. I'm just grateful to be yours. So a Thanksgiving offering is, here's something specific that's happened, and I'm going to give God an offering because of this one thing. My baby's been born healthy or whatever. The free will offering is, I'm just overwhelmed with joy to be God's child. I'm just so thankful I'm here. So I'm going to go give Him a peace will offering, a free will peace offering, just to say I'm grateful to be yours. And then there is a votive offering. A votive offering to this is when you have and we're really not encouraged to do this now. A votive offering means you're making a vow. So a votive offering is if there's been an extreme thing in your life, whether good or bad, then you go to the Lord and make this, but it's always accompanied with a vow. And so you're going to God, and you're going to say, look, I'm making this offering to you, because we're in fellowship with each other, and I promise you I'm going to do this. I'm making a vow to you that I'm going to do this. It's okay to do that. It's okay to promise God, I'm going to be in church more. A lot of people promise that at New Year's. I'll be in church more. I'll do this better. I'll be a better this or that. The only thing God cautions us in is don't make it if you're going to break it. Don't make a vow and say, God, I promise you I'm going to do this, and then don't do it. God said, I'd rather you just not make the thing. Just keep quiet, because our mouths sometimes get us in trouble by saying, God, if you'll just get me out of this predicament, just help my doctor's report, or help my family, or help my finances. God, I promise I'll never sin again. I'll read my Bible every day. Well, no, you're not either. You're going to make a mistake one of these days, and God could hold that against you. You see what I'm saying? So God said, don't make these just empty vows just because you're trying to bargain. This is a particular vow that the Israelites were commanded to make that wasn't on that scale. It was more like, I've suffered this really deep thing or this really great thing, but I want to commune with God anyway. I want to show God that I'm in fellowship with Him anyway. It's not that I'm promising Him something. I just want to do this. And I may promise something. Now, look at the way it describes it again. It's a soothing aroma, which means it's pleasing to God because it's an offering of thanks. It's something free will. It's not the last two we're going to look at, the sin offering in chapter 4 and 5, and then the trespass offering in chapter 5 and 6. Those are for expiation of sins. Those are heavy duty things. Those are, and maybe we'll get to a little bit of it tonight, but those cover like. And by the way, the only thing that it don't cover in here that God specifically says it won't cover is what He calls high hand sin. In other words, direct rebellion against God. If I just go directly rebellious against God, these offerings don't cut it. They don't do the trick. The sin offering and the trespass offering we're going to get to later are not soothing aroma. They're not soothing offerings. They're non-soothing because they're for expiation of sin, because it directly involves specific sins. Now, he categorizes them into two ways. It's either a sin that you do it voluntarily. I mean, you sin, but it's because you were ignorant of it, or it was a mistake, or you didn't know, kind of involuntary, or it's a sin of omission. It's something God told you to do and you just didn't do. That's what those offerings cover. This peace offering is different than that. And so look at the other difference in it. And then it gets real technical with the parts of the animal that are burned. It's different here. All the participants, there's 3 participants in a sacrifice. 1 is the offerer, 2 is the priest, 3 is God. So there's 3 participants involved. In this particular offering, all 3 participants participate in the eating of it. They all get to eat something. And so by God allowing them to eat together, it shows the symbolism of the offering, because eating together is a sign of fellowship. We do it today. If you want to fellowship with somebody, or have a nice little talk with them, or get together with a family, or what, you usually eat. You sit down and eat. You invite them out to a restaurant, you invite them to your house. Eating is a sign of fellowship. And so when God told them to do this, then the people that eat this sacrifice together are committing themselves to one another in an aspect. It's that piece that we're saying, God, I'm in fellowship with you, but I'm also in fellowship with my brothers and sisters over here, and we're going to share a meal together while we fellowship. That's the whole purpose. Now, here's where it's different than the other two. If you want to go back and look at chapter 1 and 2, the other two, the burnt offering, God gets the whole thing. Nobody eats it. It's symbolically eaten by God in the sacrifice. The priest is commanded to go take the offering, cut it up, put it on the altar, set it on fire, the whole thing is consumed. So in the burnt offering, God gets the sacrifice. And there's a reason for that we're going to get into in a minute. In the second offering, the meal offering, the grain offering, God gets it because he burns some of it, the priest burns some of it, but then the priest gets to eat the leftover. And remember, it's primarily cake, some kind of cake. And so the priest gets to eat all the cake. So God gets the symbolic portion of his, and then the priest gets to eat his. But the guy that actually prepares the cake, the guy that actually does serve, he didn't get to eat anything. In this one, all three get to eat. So in this one, it's more, the fellowship is more broad because God is going to get his when they burn it. Matter of fact, he's going to give us specifics about what is to be burned to God. And I'll tell you why I think those are important. But then he says the priests and the people can then share it. So whenever Israel did a big sacrifice, I mean, whenever they sacrificed thousands at one time, it's usually a peace offering. And they take these up and they sacrifice these things. And then the nation of Israel sits together and eats together in this big happy meal, you know, and at the temple or wherever they're at. So that's the difference. Now, look at verse. Well, let's look at verse 2. Aaron's sons, the priests, are going to sprinkle blood. That's consistent. And then verse 3. The sacrifice of the peace offerings, he shall present an offering by fire to the Lord. Here's what he's given to the Lord. All right, and I'm going to tell you what animals can be used in this. But here's what you burn to God: the fat that covers the entrails, the fat that's on the entrails, the fat that's on the two kidneys, and then the fat that's on the loins, and then you burn the lobe of the liver. And so God said, when you make this offering, this is the part that God gets, the fat. God gets the fat. And then the rest of it, you guys can separate. The suet, the fat, that's the layer of fat that surrounds the organs inside. You know, it's easily pulled apart. You can separate it pretty easy. It's different than the fat that's kind of inextricably woven into the musculature. You know, it's the fat in the muscle, you can't really separate that. It's all intertwined in there. The fat that surrounds the organs, you can peel that apart. And so God said, when you kill this animal, you know, I want you to dig inside and separate all the fat and burn the fat. Then he said the fat that's around the kidneys, and the kidneys, burn those too. Then he said, take the liver, the lobe of the liver, burn that too. Burn all that for me. And then you guys can have all the meat part, but I just want the fat. Now, why in the world does God say that he wants the fat in all this? There's a lot of possible explanations. There's two that I think are pretty plausible in. Number one is, and me and you don't see it this way, at least I don't think you do, but Israelites saw the fat as the best part. That's the part they wanted, you know, the fat part. Not me, you know, I can skip the fat part, give me the meat part, you know, what I want. But, so this symbolizes, in effect, that God's getting the best, which is what me and you ought to be giving him with our life. You know, we don't sacrifice animals, then we give him ourselves. And so he says, I want you to take this animal, cut it apart, separate all the fat, because that's the best part. You know, guys, that's the best part you like. And then sacrifice it. It would be like if God flipped it today and said, okay, here's what you're going to do. People in the 21st century, you're going to kill a cow, and you're going to eat the fat and sacrifice the fillets. You know, burn the fillets to the Lord. That's what it would be like. You know, the fat for them was the best, so God gets the best. Another explanation for that, and this one makes a little bit more specific sense to me. If you want to get more specific, the kidneys and the entrails are always considered. If you look in the Old Testament, every time kidneys are mentioned or the entrails are mentioned, it's always the seat of human emotion. It doesn't say, for example, in Jeremiah that God loves our heart. Or our heart is that's our kidneys. God will say, you know, to love you down to your kidneys, not down to your heart. You know, for instance. And so the kidneys and the entrails and all the inner that represents or it symbolizes the seat of human emotion. That's where all our emotion is. Now, I'll tell you why that makes sense to me, because they offered this peace offering in times of severe or intense emotional times in their life. That's why they did it. They did it when something was going really, really good or really, really bad. And so maybe God said, because it's such an intense emotional time for you, sacrifice these organs, these things, because they symbolize the emotions of your life, you know, what's really you. And then he talks about the liver. I think there's a polemical argument for the liver. Sometimes God will use what we call polemical arguments. He'll use something that pagan people are doing, and then God will use it for His purposes in order to show the pagans that their ways are wrong way. Matter of fact, a lot of things Jesus taught were polemical against some pagans. Pagan people took the livers of animals and predicted the future with it. You know, they cut out an animal's liver, they lay it out, they look at it, the size and the shape and the color and all that stuff, and then some witch doctor dude would say, okay, based on the way this liver look, we're getting rain, or you guys better, the hunt better, you better go get the animals because we're going to have a famine soon or something. Predict the future. This is probably God's argument using pagan stuff to show the Israelites that they shouldn't be doing that kind of stuff. That you can't do what the pagans do. So I know because God is saying, I know you guys, you're weak. Y'all fall into traps all the time, and you do what the Egyptians are doing, or you do what the Mesopotamians are doing, whatever. But you're not going to do this. You're not going to start using livers to predict the future, so just burn the thing. Let's eliminate the temptation altogether. That's probably one of the reasons he included liver in here. But you see how specific God is? Take this fat, burn this. Take this kidney, burn this. Take this liver, burn this. And then you do the rest. It's God's way of regulating to the people. It's God's way of, because all these sacrifices are regulatory in a purpose. They regulate behavior. They show people how to live. They show people how to be in communion with God because it's brand new to them. That they've just come out of the Exodus. They're wandering through the wilderness. God is trying to establish a people. They don't know what to do. They don't know how to live. They've never been led by God before. They've been in bondage all these years, 420 years, and God's led them out. And God is saying, I want to be your people. I want you to be my people. I want to be your God. And so God knows us. He knows our heart. And so God's looking at them and He's thinking, you guys don't know how to do that, do you? So I'm going to show you how to do it. I'm going to show you how to live in communion with me. Although this is not the best way. God is all the while building up to the best way to be in communion with the God, which is through Jesus. But here He's saying, if you're going to be my people, we got to learn to work together. We got to learn to do this together. And so I'm going to lay out some requirements for you. First of all, He told them how to build a tabernacle. He said, you're going to build this portable tent, march it through the wilderness with you, but you're going to build it to my specifications. Don't build it a foot shorter, a foot longer, a foot higher, a foot taller. Decorate it when I tell you to decorate it, and you take it through the wilderness. And as you're going through the wilderness, you're going to do this. You're going to make sacrifices to me. Based on your sin, based on your gratitude, based on your thankfulness, based on all these things that are going on, you're going to make sacrifices to me. And then God said, but I'm going to take it a step further. Because I really want to show you that the relationship that we have now is not permanent. It's not going to work. It's not the best for you. So God said, I'm going to give you more hoops to jump through. And He says, I want you to take animals. Matter of fact, look at the animals that are mentioned in Him, because He changes up a little bit the grades and the types of animals in here. In these, it's really familiar. It's similar to the burnt offering. He said you can use bulls, lambs, and goats. They're all acceptable. This time He says you can also use females too, female animals. The burnt offering, you only use males. This time you use females too. Why? Because more people are eating it. It's pretty obvious. It's pretty simple. Sometimes Occam's razor is in effect. The simplest explanation is better. In this case, why do you include females? Because you want more animals, because more people are sacrificing, more people are eating a meal together, so you need more meat. And so God said, I want you to do this. Take these animals. But He said, I want you to kill them. I want you to butcher them up, cut them up in a certain way. Take the fat, put it over here, take the liver, the kidneys, you eat the rest. Give the priest some, you guys eat, have this communal meal together. Because He's leading them through this exercise, which is going to end up being an exercise in futility. He's going to lead them into this thing where they're going to say, there's no way we can do this. Because they're coming off the 10 Commandments. God gave them the 10 Commandments. He said, okay, here's how you live. I'm going to give you 4 commandments that relate to your relationship with me. This is how you relate to me. Don't have any other gods before me. Don't make images. Don't make graven images, that kind of thing. Then he says, I'm going to give you 6 that show you how to relate to each other. Don't steal, don't kill, don't commit adultery, those kind of things. Live by those. And then when you make a sacrifice, when you sin, whether it's an intentional sin or whether it's a sin of omission, this is the way you cover that. Because God has already showed us to cover sin takes a blood sacrifice. And so the people are going to start living like this. They're going to start going around cutting up bulls and goats and stuff all the time. And God is trying to introduce them to something because it's all revelatory for them. God is revealing himself piecemeal. In the end, God is going to reveal himself with Jesus and say, listen, now he's come to finish all this stuff. Matter of fact, I'm going to show you in a minute how he kind of fulfills these offerings. But this peace offering, he says you can use these kind of animals and you can use females, but no birds. In the burnt offering, you use birds. This time you can't use birds. Why? They don't have any meat on them. It's not very good for eating. They're so small. Now, again, this one could be done for 3 different reasons. Either Thanksgiving, either you're making a vow, or it's just a free will thing. You're just going to give because you're grateful to God. Now, look how Christ fulfills this. Christ is the peace of all believers. That's our peace. How do we have peace? How do we have peace in God? How do we have peace with God? How do we have peace of God? Through Christ. That's what we have. So he fulfills his peace offering. All the animals used in this, you can believe, what I'm about to tell you, you can believe it if you want to. I'm not sure if I do. I mean, it makes sense, but sometimes you can stretch things and make a spiritual point out of something that's really not a spiritual point. I don't know if this is one of them or not, but a lot of commentators believe each one of these animals has something to do with Jesus. For example, they say that the animals from the herd, the cows that you can kill, they represent Christ as our burden bearer because those animals are burden bearing animals. They say that the lamb means that he's our perfect sacrifice, which I can say. They say the goat suggests that Jesus is the one who takes away sin, which I guess in that sense it could be. And then they say the inward parts of the animals that are offered to God suggest that God sees the inner part of Christ as acceptable to him. I don't know if that's true or not. Sometimes you can read through the Bible and over spiritualize stuff. I heard a guy one time tell me that the camel in the Bible represented the Holy Spirit, and he started talking about the eyes and the ears flapping and all this stuff. And I'm like, I think that might be a bit. Maybe it's just a camel. It's just an animal. So I think sometimes you can over spiritualize something. So I don't know. But anyway, this offering, this peace offering, is made by the priest because the people are trying to say, by making this offering, we have peace with you, we have communion with you, we have fellowship with you. It was Christ's death that made that possible. Christ died to make peace with God possible. So in this peace offering, Jesus is represented. Because he died to give us peace. He died to bring us to God. He died to restore our communion with God that we severed. He did that. And so that's what I'm telling you. We read these things and they're really weird rules and weird things in the book of Leviticus, but they point to Jesus. They're here for a reason. They're here to show us that God gave them this. Like I said, God gave them 10 commandments. He said, here's 10 things. That's all you got to do, 10 things. 4 relates to how we relate to God. 6 relate to how we relate to each other. Sounds pretty simple. Don't make idols. Don't steal. Don't commit adultery. Sounds pretty simple. I mean, you read them and you say, I can do that. But the Jewish people say, man, we're having a really hard time with this. And so, really, instead of talking to God, saying, God, help us to do this, they said, let's create more laws just to keep those 10. And I've told you before, if you can't keep 10, you can't keep 613. It just don't make sense. But God's point was, I want to show you that you need something simpler. Because salvation's simple. Jesus came, he died to fulfill all this. He came to take this sacrificial system away. So now we don't have to run to temples and priests and altars and all this killing ourselves. We just have to give ourselves to God. That's what Romans chapter 12 is all about. Give yourself as a reasonable sacrifice to Him. Submit yourself. You are the sacrifice. You're the thing that God wants. Give that to Him. And Paul said, that's your reasonable service. God's not asking anything you monumental. It's reasonable. It's a very easy thing to do. Give Him yourself. But just like not every Israelite kept these offerings. When they sinned, they didn't immediately go kill the animal. When they did that, they didn't keep. Some of them didn't. Today, some Christians don't. God said, give me your whole sacrifice. Give me your whole being. I want your whole life. A lot of Christians, very few Christians do that. We compartmentalize. We let God in some areas of our life, but not others. We don't give Him 100%. Very few Christians actually give Him 100%. I mean, I read about, like Jim Elliot and some of his buddies that died with those Ecuadorian Indians, and I think in my heart, I think, well, that guy gave 100%, He gave his life out there on a beach somewhere witnessing the Indians that ended up putting a spear through his heart. And then I think, well, what do I do? I mean, if I really look at the percentages of my life, how much of it do I really give Him? I mean, I'm scared to figure it out sometimes. I mean, how much does God get of me? When I'm here, I feel like it's 100%. I'm 100% in. I'm here, I'm studying, I'm talking to people, I'm visiting with people, I'm praying, I'm doing it. I'm 100% here. But when I'm at home, what does He get? What does He get on me then? I mean, what's he get when I'm in a restaurant somewhere and I overhear a conversation between people and they're struggling? Do I step in and offer them to tell them about Jesus that can help them, or do I just stay out? You know what I mean? How often does God really get about us? Because I'm not sure that sometimes it's an adequate amount. Now, look at chapter 4. I want to introduce this to you real quick, and we'll get through some of it, but we'll probably won't get through all of it. Chapter 4 starts the second section. There's two sections. The first three are sweet aroma offerings. They're voluntary. They're for fellowship, for communion with God. The second two are expiative offerings. They are to cleanse from sin. Now, the importance of this, to me, is seen in how many verses it takes up to describe it. The sin offering goes from chapter 4, verse 1, all the way through chapter 5, verse 13. If you count them up, that's 35 verses. So 35 verses God uses to tell the children of Israel and to tell us what a sin offering is all about. In other words, when you sin, here's what you have to do. So He takes 35 verses. The burnt offering was 17 verses. The meal offering is 16 verses. The peace offering we just talked about was 17 verses. And then the sin offering is 35. So he doubles the length really of his directions to us when it involves the sin offering. To me, that means it's pretty important. It's just like when Jesus says, truly, truly. When Jesus says truly, truly, He means you listen, because what I'm about to tell you is earth-shattering stuff. To me, that's kind of what it's here. Now, the sin offering is important because it's supposed to be offered before anything else. In other words, until you clean your sin up, don't do this. You can't say, God, I'm grateful for my life with you, you're awesome, and then have all this sin in your life. You got to clean the sin up first, then you offer these other sacrifices. That's the whole point to this. So you do it first. It was important through most of the holy days of the Jewish calendar, like Yom Kippur, Day of Atonement, and all that stuff. But it's a tad bit different now. This in the first three chapters, the first three offerings, it's the person that is really the focus. God outlined the animals, but it's really about the person. I'm doing this because I've done this or I've done that. In this one, let me see if I word it like this. The sacrifice in the first three reference the offerer, the person doing it. In the sin offering, the sacrifice is the type of sin. So it's not just about the person, it's about the type of sin. And then God outlines these sins. And he says, when you do these sins, this is the focus. In like the peace offering, I'm kind of the focus. I organize it. I decide I'm going to take the offering. I get my lamb. I take it. Me and the priest kill the lamb. We burn the entrails and all that stuff. And then we have a communion meal together. I organize that. I'm the focus of that. It's me giving back to God what I think God deserves from me because I worship Him. In this offering, it's all about the type of sin. It's irrespective of a person. It doesn't matter about the person, except for the offering that you bring, because the more influence and power and money you have, the more expensive offering you're supposed to bring. But it's about the sin. It's about the type of sin. Real quick, look at chapter 4. And I want you to look at, let me read these first two verses. Then the Lord spoke to Moses, saying, speak to the sons of Israel, saying, if a person sins unintentionally in any of the things which the Lord had commanded not to be done, and commits any of them, if the appointed priest sins, well first those two, that's going to highlight one type of this sin. It's unintentional. It's God told me to do it, and I inadvertently do it. That one verse is kind of the reason that the Jewish people wrote 613 other laws. Because they said, we don't want to inadvertently do it. We don't want to make a mistake. So, for example, in the commandment says, thou shalt not take the Lord thy God's name in vain. I think it means don't use it flippantly. Don't invoke it for crazy reasons. They said, we don't know when God's going to think it's in vain because of this. Because it can be unintentional. We use God's name in vain and not be intentional about it. It can be unintentional, be a mistake. And so they said, I know what we'll do. We just won't say God's name. We won't say His name at all. So even Orthodox Jews now, when I was in Israel, they'll say Hashem. If they talk about God, they'll say Hashem, which in Hebrew means the name. They call God the name. They want to say God because they're afraid, well, if they use it, it might be inadvertently in vain. So they made up a rule that's going to say His name. They don't even write it. They write G and then a little dash and then a D. They don't even write His name out because they think we might inadvertently use His name in vain, which to me is as highly legalistic and crazy as you can get, but that's what they do. And so in this sin offering, God says, if you inadvertently sin, God tells you to do something or tells you not to do it, and you do it unintentionally. It's different than what He calls a high-handed sin. That's that intentional rebellion. I know, for example, God says don't steal. And I know God says don't steal. And I just run down to the bank and I pull a gun and tell her and I say, give me everything you got. That's it. I knew what I was doing. But if I go up to the bank and I go to the drive-thru and they send me that little tube down that little chute and I take a pen out and sign something and I inadvertently put the pen down beside me and drive off, it's a little bit different. It's an inadvertent sin. I didn't intentionally do it. It's just a mistake. This is the sin that this covers. And then in verse 3 through 12, it's actually the high priest. He said if the high priest does something, that affects the whole nation. And so you're going to have to give a sacrifice for the entire nation out there. Again, I'll say this and then I can be done for tonight. In chapter 4 through chapter 5, verse 13 is a sin offering. Starting in verse 14 of chapter 5 through chapter 6 is a trespass offering. There's two different reasons for it. The sin offering, the first reason, the burnt offering, the meal offering, the peace offering, all that is to say, I'm sacrificing something to God because of what He's done for me. Because He's done this for me. And I have fellowship with Him. This one is the sin offering is directly for the propitiation of God's anger. In other words, I sinned, God's angry that I sinned, I've got to make this offering to take God's wrath off of me, which is exactly what it says Jesus did on the cross. He was our propitiation for sin. It's like God took all this anger that was manifested toward me and you because of our sin, and he hurled it at Jesus, and it kind of rebounded off Jesus on the cross. That's what propitiation is, that Jesus took God's anger and wrath and redirected it away from us. That's what this sin does. This sacrifice does. It gets rid of God's wrath. It's a propitiation for it. In the trespass offering we're going to look at next, it's purification. It's a purification. In other words, it is saying, I've sinned, and because I've sinned, I brought filth into my life, I brought dirt into my life, and so I'm going to make this offering now in order to clean my life up. So all these sins have a particular purpose and a particular reason. These last two are very different from the first two because these are commanded. The first three, you can do them or you can not do them. You just miss out on God's blessing. And God tells you to, but sometimes what God tells us to do, we don't do. But God's not going to strike you dead for it. In these, there's punishment. If you don't do it, you're going to pay for it. Because God said you can't not do these sacrifices. So that's one of the big differences. So we'll pick up with chapter 4 and 5 and look at specifically the sin offering and trespass offering starting next week. Any questions about those the peace offering or anything? Aren't y'all glad it's not this difficult today? No, nobody's got time for cutting goats open and pulling the fat out. Nobody has time for that stuff. As much as we are in violation of God's will sometimes. Anything? All right, well, I'm going to read a card that came in the mail today to the church. And I was hoping Keith would be. I don't know if Keith, can you hear me out there? I don't know if they got it on there or not. But this involves Keith, so if he can come listen to this. And I don't know if Miss Carol Green wrote us this letter. I don't know if she's watching or not. I hope she is because this means the world to us for you to write this for us. She put, "Thank you so much for your beautiful ministry to our community. The drive through the live nativity was the best I have ever seen. Even though the weather wasn't the best, I know all who saw were touched. Also, thank you for your ministry to me. Unfortunately, I had a flat tire, but your kindness blessed me. On a cold and rainy night, your guys showed the love of Christ and had my tire changed before my husband could even get there. Your church family truly demonstrates the love of Christ. I will forever be grateful. Blessings, Carol Green." So what we do means a difference to people, and I'm proud. That's big time. So thank y'all. I know Keith and him went out there and helped that lady out. So thank you for leading those people to do that. And that means a lot. When people can write us something like that, that's worth everything we do. So thank you all for being the love of Jesus. I'm going to sign off with our online folks now. Thank you people for joining us. Come and see us in person. We would love to have you here.